At this point in time, I turn it over to you. Executive Vice.
Thank you, Zach. I appreciate it. Good evening. How's everybody doing? It's a beautiful. Wow, that's nice. You don't need to clap, but I appreciate it. It's a really nice summer night, so thank you all for being here. And I know there was a contentious, or shall we say, a good Democratic, small d Democratic debate that was happening here earlier. So I'm glad that you all were willing to stay for a few minutes, and thank you, Supervisor Perry, and all you for having me. I'm a month into the job as county executive, and I absolutely love this job. And I'm happy to talk more about what the heck that is, by the way, if that's helpful to folks. But before I do that, I just should introduce myself. I actually grew up in Hurley on Jeffrey Lane, born on Rosa Lane, and then moved to Jeffrey Lane when I was 3. My family has been in Ulster County for 5 generations. My wife, Rebecca, and I don't hold this against us, but we now live in Gardner, and we love Gardner as well. But Hurley and Meyer School, and I'm a Kingston High School graduate, so I always have a place for Hurley near and dear to my heart. After high school, I went to West Point. I was an Army officer. I ran a small business, but I really missed public service. And I had grown up with this, my parents teaching me that you're part of a community, you have a responsibility to contribute and to serve and to give back in whatever ways you can. And so that's kind of how I've tried to do things. I haven't always, we all take our different paths, but this sense of giving back and doing public service is something I really miss. And so it really is an honor to serve as county executive, leading our county government, which is about 1,400 employees across 25 departments, everything from building roads and bridges with our Public Works Department to delivering really important social services, our Office of the Aging and Veterans, and lots of other great things that we do to serve the 180,000 people of the county. And I think it's really important, particularly as the new guy on the job, to not just sit in my office, but to try to really get out and hear what's going on the ground and hear people's concerns, which are very different, in Hurley versus New Paltz versus, I was up in Hardenburg last week, population 208. Their issues are very different than I'm sure the ones here. So in my first 6 months on the job, I'm going to do one of these types of meetings in every one of the 24 towns that make up this incredible county that we live in, Ulster County. So the goal is for me to shut up at this point and hopefully have a conversation and hear what's on the mind of either the town leadership or you all or both, particularly things that you think we could do better as a county government, or things just more broadly that are you're concerned about, questions you have. So I'll pause there. I'm always happy to talk about kind of my countywide priorities, but I'd much rather, I think we only have probably 20, 30 minutes, so I'd rather open it up to any questions or thoughts. Sir?
I have a question. So this year is going to be your first budget, right, as a county executive.
That's what they tell me.
And I've always felt that the county's fund balance was too high. That the state comptroller's office recommends keeping 5% of your annual budget in a fund balance.
Yep.
Okay, for the proverbial rainy day. And I know the county's gone as high as 15 and 20% in the past. So what happens when you keep money in the fund balance is you take our tax dollars and you could give them back to us in the form of a lower tax levy. You can't actually give the money back to us. And the previous county executive had done that in the past, but never reduced the fund balance to just 5%. And that's basically what the state comptroller does. So I just wonder what your thoughts are on that, because it's almost like saying you can't have your money back because you don't know how to spend it. We know how to spend it. And for many years, I kind of fought that battle on the legislature, but it wasn't the legislature's collective inclination to do that. So I just wonder how you feel about fund balances, because you can always say there's a rainy day, and then come February or March, when you get the December's tax receipts, you got $3 or $4 million in excess.
Yep. So great question. Just to zoom out for a second, Our total county budget, just as a reference, is $329 million annually. That's our operating budget, and then we've got about half of that is our capital budget that we use to build kind of longer term capital projects. The fund balance is kind of, think about your checking account vice your savings account, the place where you keep kind of your capital that you want to have quick access to that's liquid in case of a rainy day or a crisis or a shock. Frankly, I hear the 5% recommendation. I think that's a little bit risky, particularly if you look at what's happened in the last 10 years nationally and locally, where post-crisis, financial crisis, we were at a pretty low point in terms of economic activity and sales tax revenue. We've had a year-over-year growth in revenues and economic activity in the area, which is great. That's part of why we've unexpectedly had more sales tax revenue coming in, while we've held your property taxes either even or actually lowered them 9 out of the last 10 years. So my worry, frankly, is that macroeconomic trends are cyclical, and at some point we might see a downward trend, hopefully not, in just our economy and the country. We all know things are pretty, you could argue, inflated right now. And so one of my priorities coming in is to do some contingency planning, make sure that we're ready for a worst case scenario so that we don't have to raise property taxes or sales tax revenue. But I hear your point, and definitely I want to absolutely make best responsible use of taxpayer dollars. But my goal is to continue to be that good steward and don't foresee the need to raise our county property taxes anytime soon, or sales tax. Ma'am?
Many people, and I would say probably governments and companies, measure well-being on financial means, right? There are other places in the world that measure well-being in other ways. And so I'm wondering what your kind of measure of well-being
Great question.
would include.
Yeah. Well, I think it's hard to capture it in any one measure. I'll tell you the statistic that I'm really have been focused on. I talked about this for several months leading up to this, the special election we had in April. We talk about unemployment, which we know is about 3.3%, which is near as low as it can get. But the statistic that I think is much more telling is one that basically talks about not just how much, whether you have a job, but how much you're making compared to your ability to pay your bills, particularly healthcare, housing, transportation, childcare, those kinds of things. The United Way put out this report, the Ulster County United Way, at the end of 2018, that looked at that and basically said income versus expenses in Ulster County. Over 40% of Ulster County residents are living paycheck to paycheck by their definition. I think it might even be more, probably higher than that. I think that's more. Yeah. And so that to me is completely unacceptable in 2019 in the United States of America, that that's the case. That people are feeling that strain of, do I go shopping this week or do I pay the unexpected auto repair that, happened through no fault of my own, probably. And so that's at the core. I've laid out 5 big priorities, and one of them is economic growth that's actually equitable for everyone, that addresses that fact. So we're going to be particularly looking at housing affordability as one of the key things that we need to work on. It's a big problem in our county right now. We just don't have the housing stock that we need. And I know you all were talking about housing. So there's a responsible way to do that and a smart way to do that. But to your question, I think that's really what matters. If people are working, they should be able to afford a decent place to live and a little bit of money to save and good food, healthy food on the table type of thing. At a minimum. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Is that what you were, or was there something else you think we should be measuring?
I could continue to extrapolate, but I won't.
Okay.
Please start.
I know you're very involved with environmental issues and dealing with plastic, right? And I wonder if there's any conversation about clamshells the ubiquitous clamshells, which seem to be non-recyclable, according
Yeah.
to the Resource Recovery Agency.
Yep.
And
Those are those, like, I didn't know what this was until
Plastic.
relatively recently, exactly. Yeah,
And they really are piling up.
yeah. So,
And I just wonder if there's any thought of doing some kind of a, I don't know if it's legislation, or something that requires people who are bringing materials into our community to have a life cycle plan on the way to use materials at the end of the cycle, rather
Yeah.
than just leaving them with us.
right, right. Yeah, so another one of my big 5 priorities is on the environmental front. And I think beyond the moral side of this, we could talk about the kind of economic side of recognizing that in Ulster County, the beauty of our environment, clean air, water, soil, like that's what attracts, I think, a lot of people here. So that, preserving that is critical, I think. Just today, actually, we put into effect the single-use plastic bag ban, which I know will cause some change for people, but I think it's a good change.
It was heavy.
Yeah.
It was heavy.
Yeah, so we're all gonna have to adjust, and you know, when you leave the house, you get your keys and your wallet and your phone. You know, you gotta have your phone, you gotta have the Twitter and the Facebook, but you take a reusable bag with you too. I think that's just part of what we need to kind of drive.
Stays in the car.
So that's a piece of it. You know, we signed the plastic straw opt out. You know, skip the straw. I think other plastics, clamshells and others, are something we need to, that we plan to. What's that, ma'am?
When did the straw come into effect? Today too?
The straw is in a few months. I forget the exact date.
Yes,
A lot of
that's
businesses
fine.
have already started doing
Yes.
it.
Yeah.
And what's really cool, by the way, about the bags, we're the first county in New York State to do
Yes,
this.
I know.
I'm pretty proud of that. And I think we're going to show that it can actually, you know, there will be some disruptions, but it'll be net good. Did you have a follow-up?
Is the clamshell a styrofoam?
It's plastic usually. It's like
Food container.
most of these clamshells are not at the grade or, you know, the sort of type of plastic that's recyclable, and people don't realize that. And businesses often don't realize that. They think they're doing something. We banned styrofoam as well. That was a few years ago. So Ulster County really is at the leading edge of
Are you
this.
going to ban those too? Are they allowed to use those?
The clam shells. So right now they're allowed. You know, I think that one of the things that I want to really have the conversation is with especially small business owners, because that's one of my concerns, is that if we don't have a viable option, then that's going to really hurt our small businesses, and 98% of our businesses are small. So I don't, you know, having run one myself, my dad ran one here for 40 years, I mean, I don't want to hurt small business, so we need to come up with an answer that's feasible. But I do think it's clear, the science is clear on plastics, we need to find alternatives. And then the other piece that we're doing on environmental issues that I'm really excited about, as a county government, we're one of the largest consumers of energy in the whole county. And we are going to lead by example, and by 2030, transition to 100% renewable energy for our county government, including the vehicle fleet, all of our buildings, and we're going to produce that locally. So my second week in office, we announced we're going to build a second solar array in the county that'll let us move from where we are right now, which is 20%, to 40%. And we took an old polluted brownfield site in Saugerties. It was a tire dump, and we're converting that into a county solar energy production facility. So more of those kinds of projects, I think, will continue to both be good for the environment, but also build our reputation as this kind of forward-looking place that'll draw more people in. So,
I'd like to change the topic a
Sure.
little bit and talk about the Glenford Dyke. The Glenford Dyke is in the town of Hurley.
yeah.
And it has been the goal recently of the Catskill Mountain Railroad to be able to extend its route
Yeah.
to the Glenford Dyke in order to have a truly beautiful scenic destination that appeals to adults. And I would love to see the county show support in helping to interface with the DEP to try to be able to help this happen. A mile from Reservoir Road, or the eastern end of the reservoir land, to the Glenford Dike. It's a beautiful, beautiful view. When the reservoir was built, this particular area was double tracked, and it has the space for both the trail, which is currently being built and looks like it's going to be beautiful and a great addition to the county. But we could have both. We could have a beautiful scenic railroad going from Kingston to the Glenford Dike and have the trail coexist for this mile together. And it's been a long slog the last 6 years. I have always been in the camp that wanted to see a rail with a trail. And you may have followed and heard
There's been a little bit of debate.
but I think that now this is a new era, and I would really love to see, I think it would be wonderful for the town of Hurley to have this destination at the Glenford Dike and appeal to people being able to take the train up to the beginning of the trail, as opposed to either driving from Kingston to the trailhead, or it's going to be a long time before a trail is built, I think, from Kingston to the reservoir, and the train is here now. And those of you who've been following, it's brought enormous positive economic growth and publicity, and really put Kingston and railroads on the map. It's the last remains of the Ulster and Delaware Railroad of Ulster County. And I think it's a treasure, and I would really love to see the county finally show tremendous support for both the railroad and the trail.
So I was out, I actually got to do a sneak peek of the Ashokan Reservoir Trail last Friday afternoon, and I was standing on the Glenford Dike. It is, I mean, you all already kind of know this, but with the trail being constructed, I mean, it's going to be one of the top draws, I think, in the Northeast in terms of pulling people in. So my goal is to get as many people as we possibly can to experience that, to drive tourism, and also to allow anybody in the county, particularly people in like the city of Kingston, to get to enjoy that kind of beautiful scenic place. I know there's a lot of back and forth. One of the things I've tried to do coming in is kind of reset and have an open discussion with the leadership of the railroad that felt that they kind of didn't have a seat at the table. So I've opened that dialogue up. The only concern I have is just around, frankly, the environmental concern. I think in 2019 it's hard to justify, a very dirty kind of mode of transit adding more capacity. So if there's some way to resolve that. And then the other piece we have looked at is creating like an express bus route up to the three trailheads that are being planned along the Ashokan rail trail. But I hear you, and I'll look at it. I just
Railroads are the wave of the future, so if they can be.
well, I think high-speed clean rail is the wave of the future, but these are from the 1950s.
Right.
So that's my concern. But I hear you.
Do you know when those rail trails will open then?
We're hoping to open at least, so it's an 11-mile stretch. We're hoping to open at least 8 of that by October. That's the goal. It's I'd say like 90+%. And Tim from my team did a lot of work, so jump in. But
And will that be publicized that it's open? Is that
yeah, we'll do a huge. We'll invite everybody.
Can't wait.
Yeah, I mean, I was out there. It looks great. At the far sort of northwestern edge, we're building a bridge over the Esopus. That's kind of the last big piece that's still being worked on. But the dike portion is pretty done.
And what is the
And
surface?
It's like what's it called?
Compacted crushed stone.
Compacted crushed stone. So it's like a nice rail trail finish. It's not paved, but
Better than basically any unpaved trails in our county so far.
and what's cool is it's wide.
Yeah. Did you take
So-
the train tracks out?
We drove up.
I mean,
Oh,
I
past,
really think that's a mistake to remove train tracks.
yeah.
You never know what the future's gonna bring, and you might need one of those things to get from one place to another.
No, I know, and I get that, and I know we gotta continue to have the discussion, and
And if
I
there's-
inherited the situation we have,
And
not
if
trying
there's gonna be a train, then absolutely, it should be like an electric train.
Yeah, one option that I know I've been talking to them about is, the train at a minimum can go to Basin Road, basically, where they could possibly, and then connect into the trail there. So that's something we've talked about, but again, at least we've reopened the conversation. I think that's a good start, certainly.
On the subject of the railroad, the Washington Avenue Railroad crossing is atrocious.
I agree.
And for ages.
I agree.
The state did a beautiful job on Route
209, yeah.
Is it the railroad or the county that's responsible?
It's the county to fix it. So we got the funding to fix 209, and we're working on trying to get the funding to fix. It's both this county and city in the case of Washington Avenue. Myself and the mayor are working on it together, Mayor Noble. I'm not happy with that at all. I agree with you. I think it's unsafe. It just doesn't, frankly, look great as one of the first things you see when you come off the throughway coming in.
It's absolutely unsafe because when you slow down to cross the tracks, you get really
Yeah. I can get you a more detailed, maybe I can follow up with you as well if that's helpful, or get your answer afterwards in terms of the timing on that, but I hear you. We also did just get funding on the 209 piece for new drop-down safety measures, so the goal is to replicate that on Washington Avenue as well.
How are we tracking on sales tax?
Yeah, so I feel good with where we're at. There was a month of data that came out and was reported in the press as behind what we were last year, but I think from what I've seen, we're in
Yeah, I was
good
looking
shape.
at that. You know, my concern is that with 3 restaurants on the throughway, we get a lot of revenue from that.
Yep.
And it seems to me that I think there's more travel out there and we're getting less sales tax. And I think that's something that needs to be challenged.
Yeah, I can look specifically at the.
Because,
yeah.
as you know, that's one of these things that really feeds into our tax.
Yeah. So at this point, 37% of our revenues that feed the $330 million budget are from sales tax, and that has been growing and growing and growing over the last few years, just really due to more economic activity in the county, tourism, and otherwise. So. I can specifically look at the.
Because thrown into that is the price of gas.
Right.
That's where a lot of the revenue comes from.
Right. Yeah. Lower gas prices result in less sales tax revenue, but that's part of. I'm okay with that trade-off.
For years, these prices are great.
Yeah.
So, I understand that affordable housing is to be but I think that it's they need to bear this in mind just to support the fact that it has to be very responsible and we don't want to overtax the resources that we have available.
Yeah.
I mean, if there's not enough water,
Right.
and there's not enough this,
Yep.
these things are all important. Have the legislature recently passed a rent control legislation,
The state legislature.
state legislation
Yep.
that empower individual municipalities to,
Right.
I don't know if that's county or state.
Yeah, so on your first point, I agree with you on housing. And one thing that I think is really important when we talk about housing affordability, I'm not talking just affordable housing, which a lot of folks think is, below some qualified level for some kind of assistance. I'm talking every level of there's not a lot of millionaires running around that I know around here.
$40,000, how much can you afford?
Exactly. So one of the big gaps I think is above the economically subsidized level where people are making around the kind of median household income, which is $55,000 in Ulster County, and are nowhere near being able to live in the type of place they should. So we're going to roll out a plan that looks at all the different kind of pieces of the market. And then on your second point, now I'm having a senior moment. Rent control, thank you. So the state, I know, the state passed this legislation. So the good news is you have a say in it. Each town has the right to opt in or not. It's by town. The only role that the county will have in this will be if a town opts in, the county will have a county-wide board that sets the rates around rent control. One other piece though on this, there were a bunch of kind of tenants' rights pieces of legislation passed. One was rent control, which I hear you. I think that hasn't worked super well in the city, New York City. So we have to be really thoughtful about that. But there were a lot of other pieces passed that I do think are really good for our area. For example, one of the specifics was the maximum security deposit that people can pay is now 1 month's rent, when before people were often charging 2+. So that's, I think, something that makes...
They can't do the first month, the last month, and a month?
Correct. It's now 1 month.
They cannot.
So that was an important protection. There are some other protections around eviction for people having more time to get legal representation before they're evicted. There are some mega real estate companies that are buying up properties, including, most recently Stony Run, for example, that don't even have offices in this area. That's really concerning to me. And so some of the legislation passed, I think, will help give a little more protection to people that are renting, that are feeling that squeeze.
I've lived in this county my whole life. I think I'm the 14th generation here.
Wow.
And I actually manage some rental property for my parents. And they just have 4 apartments. And what I can say is, they are very focused on providing, affordable rents for people. And are very conscious about that. And it's a belief of mine that the lack of affordable rentals has a direct connection with the amount of Airbnbs and properties that are being bought.
Oh, definitely.
People out of the area just really want to exploit and us and profit from us. So maybe there should be a percentage. I don't know. I mean, there's got to be a way to.
So you're talking on short-term rentals?
Yeah.
Yeah. So several towns are addressing this. Woodstock just passed some legislation that is at least, I think, in the ballpark. I will say it's very different town to town, having traveled around. So I think it's important that you all tackle that at your level. We are helping a little bit if towns want help in terms of providing some data. We as a county now have an accurate picture of every short-term rental in the county, and we're sharing that with any town that wants to have that data just so they can understand what's going on. And if there are other ways that our planning department can help you all as you're thinking through stuff, happy to do it. Also happy to stay out of it and let you all work that out at the town.
Are we out of time for just one more? Or we have to have planning? We have to.
I don't know you, so in the middle of a conversation, said you have 5 goals. Would you tell me about them?
Sure, yes. I'll do the 30-second version.
Yes.
And happy to talk more.
Thank you.
Number 1 is implementing environmental reform. So I've actually called for an Ulster County version of a Green New Deal in our county that moves us to renewable energy 100% and invests in green job training at the community college and at BOCES. Number 2, economic development that's equitable for everybody, which we've talked a little bit about. Number 3, redefining what we mean by justice in our county. Programs to, for example, drug courts and veterans courts, mental health courts to create off-ramps to incarceration, which we, I think, do way too much of. It costs 7 times more to incarcerate someone than rehabilitate them. That's the 3rd. The 4th is trying to be more in our government, you know, be a steward of taxpayer dollars and be more responsive and responsible. So we stood up, actually Tim heads a new team, I stood up an innovation team to use data to better inform and measure how we're delivering services to people. The ultimate goal is to get to a 311 system in the county where people can call and get questions answered, or if we can't solve it, we'll at least kind of direct you to somebody that can. Is that 5 or is that 4? Let's see. Oh, thank you. The opioid epidemic, tackling the opioid epidemic. So just last week, we announced that we secured $3 million in federal and state aid to ramp up opioid prevention in the county specifically. Right now, Ulster County is the worst of 62 counties in New York State for deaths per capita, which is obviously tragic and horrible. And so we're going to bring funding, and I also appointed someone specifically on my team just to focus on addressing that issue. So thank you for asking. That wasn't 30 seconds. But.
As a father of number 5.
I'll give you all your time. I thank you very much, and if you have more questions,